Basically, I mean, what's regulated right now is when you spend money to place your content on someone else's site. You know, and advertising was what they were, what they were looking at the time. You know, if you pay to put up an ad, you have to have, the same, stand by your ad disclaimer disclosure that you would for print or media. You know, what they've taken out of the process, through two different means are sort of what volunteers do. You know, first of all, anything that an individual chooses to do voluntarily online is covered by the volunteer exception. And the other exception that gets all this money out of it is what's called, the press exception, which is that, bloggers, like any other journalist, if you're engaged in news, editorial, and commentary about public events, then the costs that go into that production aren't counted as contributions or expenditures. By and large, I mean, all these people have been left alone. I mean,
Well, we were told if we left them alone that there would be this all kinds of evasion, stealth campaigns. Campaigns would secretively pay bloggers under the table. None of that seems to have happened, right? So far.
None of it seems to have happened. I mean, obviously, it happened in 2004 with the John Toon Senate campaign in South Dakota, where they were paying two of the bloggers. I mean, it was reported in their FEC reports, the pay lines to these individuals. And the Daschle campaign caught up on it, but the media just didn't seem to care. But since then, especially when you look at 2008, if there was corruption going on online, nobody detected it, and it didn't really matter. I mean, there was definitely a lot of hullabaloo in 2005 and 2006 about, Halliburton could start a blog, scary foreigners could start paying Americans to, to blog on Daily Kos and distort the debate. And people, if it happened, people tend to sift through that. But
I don't think bloggers are enough. They're essential. But I don't think the fact that you've and the FEC have successfully protected bloggers is the end of where we should be looking for more freedom, right? No. So I helped start with Joe Trippi this organization, Change Congress. Without breaching our fiduciary, our attorney-client relationship, I'll just say, you and I spent enormous amounts of time, and I can tell you Change Congress had to spend an enormous amount of money, unfortunately not on you, to actually be able to function as an organization, legal, consistent with our laws, doing political organizing. This is ridiculous. I'm not just saying just for me. I'm saying the level of regulation here seems to me way out of proportion to where it should be. Now, I'm happy again to accept that in the world that we've got right now, you need it because you've got so many concerns about the way money is influencing politics. These are our second or third best solutions for it. Mm-hmm. But if we get to the world you posited, which I'm still kind of elated to imagine, where we have public funding or we have citizen funding in the broadest sense, then to answer your question, yes, I think there are certain kind of traditional, quote, regulations which free marketeers don't notice as regulations. Those are things like anti-fraud provisions and things like what in IP law we think of as trademark. So linking back to say that you stand behind something as a way of just saying, who's saying what they're saying. And I don't have any problem with that. But I think that actually beyond that, there would be a field day of wiping away a whole bunch of the stuff that now clutters the opportunity for small political organizations to take off, that big political organizations didn't notice because they could incorporate it inside their costs. Just like in the culture space, what we need is the opportunity for lots of small speakers to take off without having to hire a lawyer to advise them on fair use every time they produce.
But Change Congress is seeking to change laws, and it's lobbying Congress, and it's asking its members to call members of Congress, and you're sending a clear political message of support or opposition. I mean, where would you set the threshold? Are you saying that if, obviously the $1,000 threshold for reporting is meant to basically exempt volunteers, but catch everybody else who's sort of professional, activists, advocates. So are you saying that you would push that threshold higher? I mean, I agree with you. There's a lot of legalese and paperwork and IRS filings to get, your 501c3 status or whatever status you're going to get. And one could argue that that's a hindrance to free expression, or you could say, but we need a certain kind of transparency and disclosure too. So would you put it up at $1 million, 500? I mean, where would you set that line?
The problem is any answer to that question sounds ridiculous because the assumption you've made is so hard for people to imagine. So, we spend an enormous amount of time to kind of make sure that we understand what indirect contributions people are making to campaigns, right? Well, in a world of public funding, we don't worry about contributions to campaigns because there are not those direct contributions. Now, I'm happy to admit that we might have a problem with the independent expenditures. That might create exactly the same kind of cynicism that I'm worried about with direct contributions. That seems to me an empirical question. We have to wait and see about that. But if we really are in the world where there's no direct contributions except the $100 contributions, then I think an enormous number of these heavy, centralized New Deal-like regulations get wiped away.
And let's say we're still in the world we're in. Is regulation of the internet, political activity on the internet now too heavy, too light, just about right?
Well, that's Adam's. That's for Adam.
All right.
Just about right. I mean, the one place that I've thought about that there might be a need for additional regulation, because it wasn't contemplated before, and it is something of a loophole, is the whole question of extending stand-by-your ad to YouTube. Because you don't have to pay to place your videos on YouTube, the rules don't apply. And a campaign, using any username at once can put video on YouTube, doesn't have to disclose that it's a campaign that's speaking. A PAC doesn't have to disclose that it's it that's speaking. And it can proceed anonymously that way. What tends to cover this problem anyway, and we saw this with the Hillary Clinton 1984 video that hit 3 million, 5 million, 10 million views before its author was exposed, is just the human desire to take credit. When you create something that 5 million people have seen, you're going to tell someone about it, and that person's going to tell other people about it. And these things are going to get exposed. I mean, so that is one area where I could possibly see more regulation being necessary. By and large, I think things are pretty good as is. I mean, the other thing related to that...
Can I just ask you about that? So let me push back against something I said as well. So why do we even think this is necessary, right? So
I'm not saying it is necessary. I'm saying I could see it as possibly being a logical translation of the existing laws to another medium, especially as people stop viewing campaign ads on TV anyway because of TiVo, and that's the only place where they're really seeing campaign
speech. It might be a translation, but again, I want to ask, why do you think it's necessary, right? I mean, I think one big difference between the world we're in right now, or the world we will be in, and where we were, it was actually, when I was a kid, I went to the Soviet Union a bunch of times. There's a guy there a professor there who explained to me when I was like 20 years old, that there was more free speech in Russia than there was in the Soviet Union than there was in America. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, you wake up in the morning, you read the New York Times, you think you know the truth, or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal. In Russia, we know all the newspapers are lying to us, so we have to read 7 different things and then triangulate on the truth. Well, we've all become Russians now. This is who we are right now. Like, my students, I have no concern at all that they're going to be able to suss out and figure out, misleading stuff in this space, because that's the way they're trained. They think in this Russian-like way right now. And so even in the context of YouTube, heavy regulation or heavy requirements of transparency here, I'm not yet convinced.
Well, there's a different issue, Adam, which is you couldn't enforce it anyway. I mean, you might say that after it gets 1 million views, YouTube has to take it down unless the author comes forward. I mean, I don't know how you could. All that would do would be to channel even more interest to somebody who is putting the video up on BitTorrent or something. Yeah. And there's already a group called Anonymous, which is a very interesting phenomenon. I suggest you Google Anonymous in Scientology as one example. These are hackers who take pleasure in going after various targets, some of them perhaps politically justified, some of them not. And no one knows how to expose them. It's a game. So, at the far edge here, the anonymous speech is going to win out over the desire to find out who's actually behind this or that video.